Dr. Philip Lee, MP, he's a Justice Minister, so a member of the government, has come out and said some very strong stuff following this latest report which suggests that by any model, this Brexit is going to be bad news for us economically. He said if these figures turn out to be anywhere near right, there would be serious questions over whether a government could legitimately lead a country along a path that the evidence and rational consideration indicate would be damaging. This shows the PM's challenge. Interesting stuff for a government minister to say that.
It is unheard of, generally, for a government minister to take to Twitter to basically criticise their administration. And the next tweet, after the one you've just read, he talks about the government not making decisions on the basis of dogma, populism, ideology.
Well, I'll read that tweet as well. The PM's been dealt some tough cards, and I support her mission to make the best of them. It's time for evidence, not dogma, to show the way. We must act for our country's best interest, not ideology and populism, or history will judge us harshly.
And Piers, he is absolutely right, because every single... Hang on just a minute. Every single time anybody comes out... He was responding, I think this was a response to the Brexit minister, Steve Baker, who in many respects is one of the godfathers of Brexit. He was one of the key people who helped make that campaign successful and for it to happen. But the problem is with many of these guys, and I'd extend this to their allies in the media, any time anybody questions anything about Brexit, not just whether it happens, but the form of Brexit,
Project Fear.
You are accused of being Project Fear. If you're the judges saying Parliament must have a say, you're enemies of the people. If you're an economist coming out and doing your job...
That is completely true, but it's also completely true of your side. Every time anyone says anything positive about Brexit, you lot hammer them for that in exactly the same way.
Let me give you an example.
My point about this is, he's responding to a latest report, right? But I remember all the similar reports in the referendum campaign and indeed immediately afterwards predicting financial Armageddon for this country on the basis of just the result of the referendum.
Why is this report different?
Let me tell you, there are two very important things. Steve Baker, who made exactly the point that you've just made, the Brexit minister I was just talking about, said, well, look, the Bank of England had all these forecasts before the referendum and none of them turned out to be true. Why? Because the Bank of England took emergency measures after that Brexit vote. Well, it did.
I'm sorry.
It cut interest rates, it increased quantitative easing, it provided funding to the banks. We would have been in a very difficult situation.
No, not at all. Let's just get this absolutely right. There are economists on all sides of this argument. Only 6 months ago, a group of private sector economists who had predicted the crash back in 2009 said that actually, post-Brexit, if we don't go for tariffs, we will have a better prospect than staying in the EU. Now, that was 6 months ago. The problem you've got with these forecasts is it depends what model you use. And it also depends of the collective view of the economists. You get kind of groupthink. And this has been very much the case. Every single forecast coming out of the government or the bank has always used the same gravity model, which is basically now almost completely discredited. And the result of that is they reach exactly the same conclusion. They did not forecast the crash in 2009. They got it very badly wrong post-Brexit. They said we'd lose 500,000 jobs.
Who do we
We've
trust,
actually increased
then,
250,000
on
jobs.
the economy?
My sense about this is the only thing you can trust is what happened in 2016. The British people voted to leave the European Union. The purpose of the government now...
People keep saying nobody voted to be
poorer.
Yeah, but hang on a second. With respect, this idea nobody voted to be poorer. Well, listen, did they vote to be wealthier? Did they vote to be poorer? I'm not inside their heads. What I do know...
So you think they voted to be poorer?
Well, hold on, Chuka. They voted to leave. And that is the only definitive point.
Chuka,
we have to get the best arrangement.
Right.
And this, by the way, this report does not look at what the government is trying to do, which is a good deal with the European Union. It doesn't even look at that.
I remember very similar reports. Well, editor of the Daily Mirror at the start of the century. And I remember very similar reports that if we didn't join the euro, right, it would have a similar impact. And that never happened. In fact, not joining the euro turned out to be the best thing we could have done. So I'm very sceptical about these, because I remember wholeheartedly endorsing joining the euro because Tony Blair told me to do that. Gordon Brown, Peter Mandelson, all the top trade guys, all the top business people.
I didn't, by the way.
They were all telling me, all telling me, if we don't do this, it will be financial disaster.
I wasn't in politics.
Yeah, but you were keen on it.
But at the time...
Well, I remember it.
I think I was at school, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But Gordon Brown, I don't think necessarily was a massive champion.
Well,
which is why... Hang on just a minute.
They changed their position, but I can tell you, they were urging me,
which is why...
As editor of the Daily Mirror, the Labour supporting paper, to back it, which we did. And actually, the best thing was we didn't enter it.
But he had 5 tests. And the important thing is, you're right about the forecasts, by the way, and I do agree with Iain that forecasts aren't always correct. But actually, let's look at the data for what is happening now. 3% inflation, which is affecting basic household goods that your viewers have to buy, cereal, bread, milk, eggs, for example. We have seen ourselves in the year following the referendum going from the top of the G7 Growth League to the bottom of the G7 Growth League. And actually, if you look at what's happened to that is stuff that has actually happened. That is not a forecast.
Let's look at the glass half full. Actually, growth, if you go back, this is how bad forecasting is. Go back to the budget. In the budget, the OBR, using exactly the same model, told us what our level of growth would be. 7 months later, they've had to adjust them upwards because they got it wrong. If you can't forecast 7 months of growth, how in heaven's name can you look at 15 years with all the imponderables and tell me that over that 15 years you can marginally forecast 2% change?
Is there someone better than Theresa May right now who'd be doing a better job of the negotiations?
No, I don't believe so.
Jacob Rees-Mogg?
No, I'm absolutely telling you now that we just have to get on with the job of doing it, and she is going to find it rough and tough and bumpy because it is not a majority government. But the prize at the end is we get a proper deal. And actually, by the way, I've done a lot of talking to European business leaders and politicians. Once you get them away from the cameras, they all say, we have to have a good free trade arrangement with you people because we don't want you to suffer nor us to suffer.
Nobody's want to lose money.
The big problem is people don't know where the cabinet's going because they're divided on it.
Right, well, let's see how
the biggest problem
in terms of getting the debate will rage all year. You guys will be back all year.